Well, welcome back. I hope that you found that exercise 3 was helpful in narrowing down the object of your outreach to the whom in your community that you'd like to reach with the gospel of Jesus Christ. That was step 1 of developing an outreach pathway, that determining a single and specific whom. Now we're ready to move on to step 2, where we select an outreach gateway. So this session's all about selecting an outreach gateway. Now, what is an outreach gateway? It's a ministry, service, other activity in the congregation that provides us with opportunities for outreach. Now, this is a really important point, one that I'm going to repeat. You'll get tired of hearing it, but it's so important, it's got to be repeated. The outreach gateway isn't necessarily an outreach activity. It takes place whether we do outreach or not. So what is an outreach gateway? Now, an outreach gateway is a ministry, service, or other activity in the congregation that provides us with opportunities for outreach. Now, this is a really important point, and I'm going to keep repeating it. You'll get tired of hearing it, but this is a critical understanding of an outreach gateway. It takes place whether we do outreach or not. The outreach gateway isn't the outreach activity. It's a means for getting people from outside of our community to a point where we can carry out the outreach that we're planning. So this activity will take place whether we do outreach or we don't do outreach. An example of that might be, say, after-school tutoring. You're going to do after-school tutoring whether you do outreach or not. But after-school tutoring becomes the gateway, the means by which we're able to carry out our outreach activities, because it's meeting that unmet need in our community. It's bringing people together. It's giving us the opportunity to create connections, nurture relationships, and make disciples. Now, this is another really important point. The outreach gateway is planned as an outreach gateway. It's an ongoing activity. It stands on its own. We plan our outreach activities independently of, but in conjunction with the outreach gateway. So again, if you're doing after-school tutoring, you're planning the after-school tutoring. People are coming in. You have a system of registering them. You have teachers or tutors who are there to help them. All that's being planned and taken care of by the people who run after-school tutoring. Your outreach pathway is planning the outreach activities that aren't really part of tutoring. They're just alongside of the tutoring. Now, let's talk about this some more, because I think you'll become more clear as we work through what an outreach gateway is. See, the outreach gateway is feeding the outreach pathway. That ministry or activity that's going on, like after-school tutoring, is taking place, and through it, we're bringing people into the pathway. Most of the time, we're bringing them in at the create connections point, but other times we're bringing them in through nurturing relationships or through the making disciples part. But one way or another, there's something going on in that after-school tutoring that creates an opportunity for us to carry out our outreach activities. There's some key questions that will really guide us in understanding what makes for a good outreach gateway. And these help us determine if an outreach gateway has the potential to be effective in our context. So something like after-school tutoring, is that going to work for our context? Is that going to work for the whom we're trying to reach? So if we're trying to reach retired people, after-school tutoring may not be a very good outreach gateway. But if we're trying to reach young children, the siblings of the children who come to after-school tutoring, then yeah. So how do we figure out which activities and ministries of our congregation make for good outreach gateways? That's what these questions help us determine. A single no answer along these questions would indicate that this activity is not likely to be an effective outreach. It wouldn't make for a good outreach gateway, in other words. So we can think of it this way. A no answer to any one of these 6 questions means that gateway is closed. But don't give up on it, because any one of those gateways could become an effective way of doing outreach. And we have to think through, well, what can we do to change a no to a yes? So these key questions are there not just to say yes or no, but in the case of a no, what could we do differently that would actually make this into a yes? These are the key questions, the 6 questions you want to ask, and we're going to walk through them one at a time. But again, notice that it takes yes to all 6 questions for this activity or ministry to be a good outreach gateway. Well, the first question that we want to consider is, does this ministry or activity address a need, concern, or interest of our whom? So outreach depends on us understanding the needs and concerns and interests of our community, especially the whom that we're focusing on. And so we need to know about and care about the people in our community. Just because it's of interest to us, or we think it's a great solution to a need that we may or may not exist for our home, we need to make sure that it actually is something that the person that we're reaching or seeking to reach actually sees as interesting, sees as meeting a need that they understand they have. An example of this would be if we have the after-school tutoring program. Is that meeting a need of the people we're trying to reach, our whom? If our whom is, young children, elementary age children, then yes, that's a need. If our whom are the parents of children in elementary school, that could be a great gateway. But if our whom are, newly retired people, it's probably not a good gateway for that. So as we ask this question, as we get to an answer, make sure that we're considering it specifically for the whom that we identified in step 1 of building the outreach gateway. The next question we want to consider is there room for us to do this ministry or activity in our community? Now, as we look at how we want to serve this particular whom that we've selected, we have to look around and say, well, what else is going on in our community? Is there already another organization meeting this need? Are people already serving the whom in this way that we're anticipating serving this person? What are other churches doing? Quite often we find other churches have already started some kind of ministry or activity to serve the whom that we want to serve. And we don't want to find ourselves going into competition with another church, especially one that has a well-established program, or a governmental agency or a non-governmental agency that has a lot of resources. So we want to know what governmental and non-governmental agencies are doing or planning to do in our community. So let's make sure there's room for us to carry out this work in our community for this whom. Third question, is there a sufficient level of interest concerning this ministry or activity within our congregation? So as we talk to people in the congregation about this idea of this is what we're going to do to reach these particular people, this particular whom, do people get excited about it? Oh, wait a minute, Lutherans getting excited. Yeah, it happens, okay? And that's really great when it does, when people say, yeah, we can do this, even if they do it in a reserved Lutheran sort of way. So are people interested in it? Or on the other side of the equation, is there significant opposition to it in the congregation? You don't want to find yourself spending a lot of time and energy and resources fighting, to get something done. And then a really important question, are members of the congregation willing to do the work that's necessary to make this happen? Because if we can put money into things, but we really, in order to carry out effective outreach, we need people into things. Money isn't going to, carry on the outreach and build relationships with people. It takes people to do that. So do we have members in our congregation that are willing to do that? So, very important question. The next question, do we have or can we readily acquire the technical expertise required for this ministry or activity? So, there may be a really great idea for an outreach gateway, but if we don't know how to do it, we don't have the technical expertise to do it, or it's just something beyond us, we've got to be careful, because we don't want to take on so much that we're not able to actually carry it out. So we do have interested and available members with the required expertise, or if not, are there resources for equipping our members that are readily available? So you might say, well, we've never done an after-school tutoring program before. We really don't know how to do it. Well, there are resources that will guide you through how to set up and operate an after-school tutoring program. And they're readily available, and they're great resources, and they can equip us to do this work. This is not one of those questions that is, if you have to say no right now, that you have to stop, because you can look a little bit further and say, how do we turn that no into a yes? Are we able to fund this ministry or activity in a sustainable manner? A lot of things that we do for outreach, they do take financial resources. In order to continue this into the foreseeable future, we need to make sure that we have the financial resources, the financial backing to carry this activity out. Now, some activities can actually generate revenue that can help fund the activity over the long haul. But it's something you need to step back and really consider. Are we able to fund this? Or if we can't do it within the congregation, are there resources outside the congregation that can help us fund this thing on an ongoing basis? And the final question we want to ask is, do we have or can we create the capacity for this ministry or activity? So, we have an idea of whom we want to serve. We have the resources, we have the interest. Do we really have the capacity for this? Now, that means space sometimes, a place, a facility of some kind to carry out the activity. It may mean equipment or technology that we need to do the activity. It may be something that there's a licensing or legal requirement that we have to meet. So you might say, well, we're going to do after-school tutoring. We might want to check your insurance, for example. Does the state regulate this in some way? If you have to provide transportation for the children to get from the elementary school to your congregation, have you met the requirements for that? Make sure that you've actually, gone through the process of figuring out what does this require, and do we have the capacity to carry it out? I know in my own experience as a church planter, we were reaching the community through an early childhood ministry. I became unwillingly, I might add, an expert in Florida's child care regulations. And I had to know everything from how much space does a child need in square footage to how many lumens of light at 2 feet above the floor are required in order to meet the requirements of the state. So it was very challenging, but we had to find a way to meet those requirements, to create the capacity for that ministry. So those are the things that we want to consider, 6 really important questions as we consider any activity in terms of, can this be an effective outreach gateway? Now, our friends at St. John by the Sea have also worked through these questions. And if you recall, they identified their whom as married women with young children. And now they're looking at an activity that they already have going on in their congregation called Dollars and Cents as an outreach gateway. So they want to know, can we use dollars and cents as a way of reaching out to non-church married women with young children who live in Seaside Bluffs? Now, first of all, they wanted to verify that the Dollars and Cents team was scheduling a class. See, the outreach team wasn't really working on how do we plan dollars and cents, what do we do, how do we do dollars and cents, there's already other people doing that. They just want to check in to make sure, are you doing this class, and when are you doing it? And we want to plan outreach activities in conjunction with the next time you hold dollars and cents. And so they're focusing on evaluating dollars and cents as an outreach gateway, not planning dollars and cents as an activity. Somebody else is taking care of that. So that's a really key point, one that bears repeating, that an outreach gateway is something that takes place whether we do outreach or not. We want to focus on planning outreach activities that are done alongside of or in conjunction with the outreach gateway, in this case, dollars and cents. As the St. John by the Sea folks were working through the 6 questions, they found that the dollars and cents class met all 6 questions. They were able to answer yes to all 6 of them. So based on their evaluation, they determined that dollars and cents would be a good outreach gateway, has good potential for effective outreach. And so they selected dollars and cents as their outreach gateway. Now you're going to do an exercise where you're going to work through step 2 of building this outreach gateway. You'll pick up where you left off. You've identified your whom. Now you're going to identify an activity or ministry in your congregation that has the potential of being an effective outreach gateway, and use these 6 key questions to help guide you in your discussions and make that selection.